You're sitting across from someone you trust. They speak slowly, deliberately, as if their words are carefully crafted just for you. You can't quite place it, but there's something in the rhythm of their speech, something in the way they tilt their head at just the right moment, something in how their gaze lingers, not long enough to be unsettling, but just long enough to draw you in. They ask you a question, not a direct one, not the kind you can answer with yes or no. Instead, it's a question that makes you explain yourself, makes you reveal something you weren't planning to share, and without realizing it, you do. Later that night, you replay the conversation in your mind. There was nothing overtly threatening, no demand, no order, just a gentle pull in a direction you didn't notice at the time, and yet, hours later, you find yourself thinking about their suggestion as though it was your own idea. Was it? Or was it placed there? Here's the paradox. The most effective manipulation rarely feels like manipulation. It doesn't come wrapped in malice or overt coercion. It comes dressed in the clothing of empathy, reason, or even love. It doesn't push, it invites. It doesn't shout, it whispers, and that's why it works. If manipulation were obvious, we'd resist it, we'd call it out, defend ourselves, fight back. But the danger isn't in the manipulation you can see, it's in the manipulation you don't. You've been manipulated more times than you could ever count, not just by people, but by ideas, by culture, by history, by the quiet undercurrents of language itself. The most dangerous strings are the ones you never see being pulled. Think about it. How many of your choices were actually born inside you? How many of your opinions are really yours? You'd like to believe you're the one steering the wheel, making your own decisions, charting your own path, but and if the thoughts that feel most like you were carefully cultivated, not by accident, but by design? What if someone or something has been planting seeds in your mind for years, knowing exactly how they would grow? If that's true, then the self you believe in so fiercely may not actually exist. The human mind is not a fortress, it's a marketplace. Every day, thousands of voices compete for attention. Friends, family, strangers, media, advertisements, algorithms. And in this endless noise, the manipulator knows something you don't. Your mind has a back door. It's not guarded by logic, it's not guarded by facts. It's guarded, or rather, unguarded, by the soft underbelly of your subconscious. Carl Jung once wrote that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Manipulators thrive in that shadowy space, in the parts of you you've never fully examined. They know that you can be led not by argument, but by invisible threads of emotion, fear, guilt, belonging, validation. And so, the most skilled manipulator doesn't fight your beliefs, they become them. They don't oppose your desires, they reshape them. They don't break your will, they guide it, one subtle step at a time, until you're walking in the direction they've chosen, thinking all along that it was your own idea. But here's where it gets more unsettling. Manipulation doesn't always come from bad people. Sometimes it comes from those who truly believe they're helping you. A parent trying to keep you safe might twist the truth to influence your decisions. A friend might nudge you toward a choice they think is best for you. Even a stranger who believes in a cause might craft their words to bypass your critical thinking and reach your emotional core. Is that still manipulation? If the intent is good, does the method matter? And if the method works, if it changes, what part of you remains truly yours? This is the great question, the one that should unsettle you enough to keep you awake tonight. If the mind can be shaped without your awareness, can you truly say you have free will? If another person, or a system, or an ideology can enter the unseen corridors of your mind and rearrange the furniture without your consent, then where exactly do you begin and they end? The truth is, you've been living in a hall of mirrors your whole life. Parents mirrored their fears onto you. Teachers mirrored the values of the society they served. Media mirrored back the insecurities it planted in you in the first place. And in this maze of reflections, you've been taught to mistake the mirror for the original, your thoughts for your own. You might resist this idea. You might feel a spark of anger, thinking, no, I know who I am. I think for myself. But that's exactly what every manipulated person thinks, right up until the moment they realize the thought they were defending so fiercely was never theirs to begin with. And yet here's the deepest danger. Manipulation works not because it changes your mind, but because it uses your mind. It doesn't replace your desires, it redirects them. Like a river diverted by hidden hands, you still flow where gravity pulls you, never noticing that the course you take was shaped long before you reached it. So here you are, reading these words, perhaps wondering, am I being manipulated right now? That's the thing. Once you start to see it, you can't unsee it. But seeing it is only the first step. The real challenge lies in tracing its roots, deep into the soil of psychology, into the myths and archetypes that have shaped humanity, into the philosophical questions that terrify those who ask them. Because to understand the hidden psychology behind manipulation, you must first confront a possibility most people will spend their entire lives avoiding. You might not be the author of your own story, and if that's true, if you've been living according to someone else's script, then the most urgent question is not, how did they do it, but how much of you is left to save? We begin there. There is a strange truth about the human mind. For all its complexity, it is surprisingly easy to lead. Not because people are stupid, not because they lack intelligence, but because they are wired for survival, and survival has always depended more on belonging than on independent thought. From the moment you are born, your nervous system is scanning the world for safety cues. A baby doesn't survive by thinking for itself. It survives by mirroring its caregivers, by adapting instantly to the emotional climate, by learning, without words, what pleases and what provokes. Before you have a single conscious memory, you have already been conditioned. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He wrote of the persona, the mask we wear to adapt to society, and the shadow, the hidden, suppressed parts of ourselves we dare not show. From the very beginning, manipulation exploits this split. It doesn't target your true self directly, it works through the mask you've been trained to wear. It whispers to the version of you that wants to belong, that fears rejection, that dreads being cast out into the cold. The first prison, the need to belong. Consider the power of exile, not in the physical sense but social exile. Throughout human history, to be cut off from the group meant almost certain death. Our brains evolved under this threat. Even now, your amygdala fires with the same urgency at the thought of social humiliation as it would at a physical threat. That's why embarrassment burns so hot, why criticism feels like an attack on your very existence. Nietzsche once warned of the herd instinct, the unconscious pull toward conformity disguised as morality. This herd instinct is fertile soil for manipulation. The manipulator knows that if they can seek or utterly threaten your belonging through disapproval, social pressure, or simply withholding validation, you will bend without even realizing you've bent. They don't need to break you. They just need to make you afraid of standing alone. The second prison, the stories you inherit. You don't just inherit your family's eye color or genetic predispositions. You inherit their stories, their beliefs about the world, about other people, about what is possible and what is not. And here lies another root of manipulation. Most of your truths were handed to you before you could question them. Schopenhauer, with his bleak but sharp clarity, wrote that a man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. Your deepest desires, what you want, what you value, were shaped long before you chose them. That shaping is often invisible, embedded in the language you speak, the cultural myths you absorb, the moral codes that feel obviously right to you simply because you never saw an alternative. A skilled manipulator doesn't need to change your values. They only need to know what they already are and then frame their influence in a way that aligns perfectly with them. The third prison, the blind spots of the mind. Psychology is full of terms for the ways our thinking deceives us. Confirmation bias, anchoring effect, cognitive dissonance, the halo effect. But these are not just academic curiosities. They are the levers manipulators pull. Take confirmation bias. The human mind naturally seeks evidence that supports what it already believes and ignores what contradicts it. This means a manipulator doesn't have to persuade you with facts. They only need to feed you the right kind of evidence and let your own mind do the rest. Or cognitive dissonance, the discomfort you feel when your beliefs and actions conflict. Manipulators exploit this by creating small commitments that push you toward bigger ones. Once you've taken a minor step, you will often twist your thinking to justify it rather than admit you were manipulated. Your brain, in other words, is wired to protect the ego. even if that means defending a lie. The philosophical hook: freedom or illusion. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that human beings are condemned to be free, that we must take responsibility for our choices because no higher authority can absolve us. But what happens when the choices themselves are illusions? If your desire for belonging, your inherited stories, and your mental blind spots all work together to make you predictable, then your freedom is already compromised. This is the hidden root of manipulation. The manipulator doesn't need chains, they just need to know the shape of your invisible cage. The architecture of influence. Let's strip it down to its core. Manipulation relies on three foundational truths about human nature. People avoid pain and seek pleasure, and will often choose short-term comfort over long-term truth. People crave meaning and identity, and will protect the stories that give them those things. People fear exclusion, and will bend themselves to avoid it. Every form of manipulation, whether it's a political campaign, a cult recruitment, a toxic relationship, or an advertising strategy, pulls on these levers in some combination. The manipulator understands that you can be guided not by raw force, but by subtly aligning their agenda with the architecture of your instincts. The role of the shadow. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow is perhaps the most unsettling key to understanding why manipulation works. The shadow holds the parts of yourself you've disowned, your aggression, your selfishness, your envy, your forbidden desires. You keep them buried because society or your upbringing taught you they are unacceptable. But what you repress still exists, and what still exists can be used against you. A manipulator can sense these disowned parts, even if you can't. They might provoke your anger and then frame themselves as the calm, reasonable one. They might mirror your unacknowledged desires and make you feel seen in a way no one else has. They might dangle a situation that lets your shadow express itself, then use your guilt to keep you under control. If you do not know your shadow, someone else will, and they will know how to make it dance. The seduction of certainty. Aldous Huxley once warned that the surest way to control a man is to give him an illusion of choice while keeping the range of options deliberately narrow. This is the quiet genius of modern manipulation. It doesn't have to silence you, it only has to give you 2 or 3 acceptable paths to walk, all leading to the same destination. People are drawn to certainty. We want clear answers, simple narratives, heroes and villains neatly defined. The manipulator offers these with a confident smile. The more uncertain the world feels, the more seductive this certainty becomes. And once you've accepted their frame, they no longer have to control you. You will control yourself according to their script. The roots of manipulation are not in the manipulator's hands. They are in your own mind, in the evolutionary wiring, cultural conditioning, and psychological blind spots you carry with you every day. And yet, knowing this is not enough, because awareness without action is just another illusion of control. The real danger is not that manipulation shapes your thoughts, it's that it shapes your reality, bending the very lens through which you see the world. And if that lens is distorted, everything you believe will be too. The question then is not just why does manipulation work, but what happens when it has worked for so long that you can no longer tell where the manipulation ends and you begin. Imagine walking through a city where every window is a mirror. At first, it's beautiful. You see yourself reflected in 100 different ways, from 100 different angles. But then you notice something strange. The reflection isn't quite right. The way you tilt your head, the way your shoulders bend, the subtle curve of your smile. It's not you. Somewhere along the way, without your noticing, you began to mimic the reflections. And now, the person in the glass feels more familiar than the person inside your own skin. This is what prolonged manipulation does. It doesn't just change how you think, it changes who you are. The slow erosion of the self. The most dangerous manipulations are not the explosive ones, the loud, aggressive pushes that trigger immediate resistance. They are the slow drips of influence, the quiet shaping of thought over weeks, months, years. At first you notice nothing. You still feel like yourself. But tiny compromises accumulate. You soften your voice so as not to provoke disapproval. You rephrase your opinions to make them more acceptable. You choose safety over authenticity. Just for today, you tell yourself, and just for today becomes forever. Eventually, you forget where you end and the manipulator begins. In Jungian terms, the persona, the mask you wear, fuses so tightly to your skin that peeling it away would feel like losing your face. The hijacking of your emotional compass. Your emotions are supposed to be internal signals, pain warning you of danger, joy guiding you toward fulfillment, guilt urging you to repair harm. But manipulation hijacks this compass. It rewires what these signals mean. A toxic partner can make you feel guilty for asserting boundaries. So guilt no longer means I've done something wrong. It means I dared to protect myself. An ideology can make you feel proud for hating an outgroup. So pride no longer means I've acted with integrity. It means I've been loyal to the tribe. Once your emotional compass is inverted, you no longer need external control. You self-police. You keep yourself in the manipulator's frame because it feels like the right thing to do. The reshaping of memory. Memory is not a static archive. It's a living reconstruction, changing every time you recall it. A manipulator knows this. They can insert doubt into your recollections. That's not what happened, you're misremembering, until your trust in your own mind begins to erode. Over time, you might begin to remember events not as they were, but as they were told to you. This is not mere gaslighting, it's the rewriting of your personal history. And if someone else controls your memories, they control your identity, because who you are is the story you tell yourself about your past. The collapse of inner authority. Every person has an inner authority, a sense of, I know what is right for me. But manipulation gradually corrodes this. You stop trusting your instincts. Every decision begins with hesitation. What if I'm wrong? What if they're right? You may find yourself in a constant state of checking for approval, checking for alignment, checking if you're still in good standing with the person, group, or ideology that holds sway over you. Nietzsche warned of this when he spoke of slave morality, a condition where your values are no longer born from your own strength but handed down from an external master. You stop asking, what do I believe, and start asking, what am I allowed to believe? The addiction to the manipulator, paradoxically, prolonged mere. Manipulation can make you dependent on the manipulator. Why? Because they position themselves as both the source of your pain and the relief from it. They create the wound, then offer the bandage. They induce fear, then give you the conditions to feel safe, if you obey. This creates a psychological loop similar to addiction. You begin to crave the very presence that is harming you, because without it you feel disoriented, anxious, incomplete. The manipulator becomes the axis around which your emotional world spins. Gabor Mate has spoken extensively about addiction as a response to pain. We seek not the substance or the person itself, but the relief they provide from unbearable internal states. In this way, manipulation can bind you more tightly than chains ever could. The cultural amplifier. It would be comforting to think that manipulation is a purely interpersonal danger, something that happens only between individuals. But culture itself can act as the grand manipulator. A society that rewards superficial beauty manipulates you into chasing appearances over substance. An economy that thrives on consumerism manipulates you into endless dissatisfaction, because the moment you are content, you stop buying. A political system that survives on division manipulates you into hating those you've never met, distracting you from questioning the system itself. In this way, personal manipulation exists inside a larger web of collective manipulation. The individual puppeteer is only a reflection of the broader forces shaping the entire stage. The loss you don't notice. Perhaps the most insidious consequence of manipulation is not what it makes you do, but what it makes you not do. You don't write the book because someone convinced you it wasn't practical. You don't leave the toxic relationship because they made you believe you couldn't survive alone. You don't speak the truth because you've been trained to think it will destroy you. You never see the life you didn't live. There's no funeral for the dreams you abandoned, no obituary for the self you might have been. Manipulation kills possibilities silently, without leaving bodies behind. The psychological imprint. Even if you escape manipulation, it leaves a mark. You might find yourself scanning new relationships for subtle cues of control, jumping at shadows of disapproval, mistrusting kindness because it feels like the bait that once trapped you. The manipulator may be gone, but their voice lives on in your head, critiquing, correcting, undermining. You may realize with horror that you have internalized them. They no longer need to speak, you speak for them. This is why breaking free is not simply a matter of leaving. The physical absence of the manipulator does not dissolve their psychological presence. In many cases, the most persistent manipulator you will ever face is the version of them you now carry within yourself. The final twist. Here is the most unsettling possibility of all. Manipulation in some form is not just something that happens to you, it is something you do to yourself. Every time you avoid a truth because it is uncomfortable, you manipulate your own perception. Every time you construct a story that casts you in a better light, you manipulate your own memory. The same psychological levers others pull on you, you also pull on yourself. The enemy is not just out there, it is woven into the fabric of your own mind. And so, the consequences of manipulation are not merely psychological scars, they are distortions of reality itself. They create an altered world where your perception is bent, your history is rewritten, and your identity is shaped by forces you never consciously chose. To confront this is terrifying, but it is also the first step toward freedom, because only when you see the architecture of the trap can you begin to dismantle it. The question now becomes, how do you break the spell? Freedom rarely begins with a grand gesture. It doesn't start with a cinematic escape, a dramatic confrontation, or the shattering of chains. More often, it begins in silence, an almost imperceptible flicker of doubt, a question that slips past the guardrails of the mind. What if they're wrong? That question is the first crack in the wall, and if you have the courage to follow it, you will discover something extraordinary. Rebellion is not just resistance against an outside force, it is a reawakening of the self you abandoned long ago. Step 1. See the cage. Before you can leave a prison, you must admit you are in one. This sounds obvious, but for those under long-term manipulation, it is the hardest step of all. The manipulator has often convinced you that the cage is safety, that its bars are protection, that life outside is chaos and danger. To rebel, you must commit an act that feels almost sinful. You must doubt what you've been told. You must look at the beliefs you hold most sacred and ask, who gave this to me, and why? Nietzsche once wrote that, to become who you are, you must be willing to burn your old certainties. That burning begins here. Step 2. Withdraw the fuel. Manipulation survives on your participation, your emotional investment, your attention, your need for approval. Remove the fuel, and the fire weakens. This doesn't mean you must immediately sever all ties. In fact, sudden, visible rebellion can trigger retaliation, especially if the manipulator has significant power over you. Instead, begin subtly. Limit what you share. Stop volunteering vulnerabilities they can exploit. Let silence grow where once there was eager compliance. The manipulator will notice. They may press harder at first, testing to see if they can reignite the old patterns. This is where your resolve is tested. Your silence must be deliberate, not passive. You are no longer a well to be drawn from at will. Step 3. Reclaim inner authority. Remember the collapse of inner authority we explored earlier. Rebuilding it requires practice. At first, small acts of decision-making without external permission. Decide what to wear without wondering what they will think. Choose how to spend an hour without checking if it's acceptable. These small acts may seem trivial, but they are rehearsals for the larger rebellions to come. Jean-Paul Sartre insisted that freedom is terrifying because it removes the excuse of inevitability. To reclaim authority over your life, you must accept the weight of your choices, not as something imposed on you, but as something that belongs to you entirely. Step 4. Confront the shadow. Carl Jung taught that until you integrate the shadow, it will control you from the dark. This is crucial because the shadow is often the manipulator's favorite lever. To confront the shadow is to face the parts of yourself you've disowned, your selfishness, your anger, your ambition, your fear. The manipulator uses these against you because you are ashamed of them. But once you own them, once you can say, yes, this too is me, their weapon turns to dust. You may find that some of these shadow traits are not bad at all. They are simply parts of you that were never allowed to breathe. Rebellion requires not just resisting the manipulator, but reclaiming the whole of yourself, light and dark alike. Step 5. Break the illusion of certainty. Manipulators thrive in environments where the rules are absolute. You are told exactly what is good, what is bad, who is safe, who is dangerous. This is comforting, predictable, but it is also a cage. To break free, you must learn to live with uncertainty. Ask questions with no immediate answer. Allow yourself to hold two conflicting truths at once. Sit in the discomfort of not knowing. Aldous Huxley's warning comes back here. The most effective control is giving you a narrow set of choices that all lead to the same place. To rebel, you must step outside that range entirely, even if it feels like walking into fog. Step 6. Build an independent reality. It is not enough to tear down the manipulator's version of reality. You must construct your own. This means seeking out information from sources they would disapprove of. It means building relationships outside their sphere of influence. It means creating environments, physical, emotional, intellectual, that nourish parts of you they have no access to. One of the most radical acts you can commit is to build a life that does not require their approval. In doing so, you starve the manipulation of its central power, the ability to define your worth. Step 7. Accept the cost. Every rebellion comes with a price. You may lose the comfort of certainty. You may lose relationships, communities, even identities you once held dear. This is why so many people choose the familiar prison over the unknown freedom. But here's the truth. What you lose is not who you are. It is who you were told you had to be. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, one who creates their own values, reminds us that freedom is not inherited, it is forged, and forging always requires fire. Step 8. Turn awareness into discipline. Escaping manipulation is not a single event, it's an ongoing practice. You must train yourself to recognize the patterns before they take root again. Ask yourself regularly, is this belief mine, or was it given to me? Is this choice made from fear of exclusion or from genuine desire? Who benefits from me thinking this way? This vigilance is not paranoia, it is sovereignty. The power of small revolutions. Do not wait for the perfect moment to rebel. Start with the smallest possible act that breaks the pattern. If you've been trained to apologize for existing, stop apologizing for things that require no apology. If you've been taught to seek approval before speaking, speak once without seeking it. Each small rebellion plants a seed of independence, and once those seeds begin to grow, the manipulator will find their garden overrun with a kind of life they can no longer control. When the manipulator is you, we must not forget the twist from the last section. Often, the manipulator lives inside you. Breaking free from others' control is meaningless if you remain in bondage to your own self-deception. This requires brutal honesty. Where are you bending truth to avoid discomfort? Where are you replaying an old script because it is easier than facing reality? Freedom means no longer lying to yourself, not about who you are, not about what you want, and not about what you've endured. The shift from victim to creator. The ultimate rebellion is not merely escape, it is creation. A victim's story ends with liberation. A creator's story begins there. When you reclaim authorship over your own narrative, you stop reacting to the manipulator's moves and start building a life they cannot touch. You write the script, you define the values, you decide the meaning. This is not the end of manipulation in the world. You will still encounter it, but it is the end of manipulation as the ruling force of your life. And yet, even after the rebellion, there remains one final haunting question. If manipulation is part of the human condition, and if we can never completely escape influence, what does true freedom even mean? That is the last and deepest truth we must face. Imagine you've finally broken free. You've dismantled the cage, silenced the manipulator's voice, reclaimed your choices, and built a life that is undeniably your own. You wake each morning feeling the air of freedom on your skin. But one night, sitting alone in quiet reflection, a thought creeps in, unwelcome, yet impossible to ignore. What if I am still being manipulated, just in ways I cannot see? It's a thought that pierces deeper than any outside threat because it suggests something devastating. Influence is not an intruder that can be permanently banished. It is part of the very structure of being human. The inescapable web. From the moment you were born, you were touched by influence. The language you speak shapes how you think. The metaphors embedded in that language guide how you perceive reality. Even the categories your mind uses to divide the world, good, evil, success, failure, self, other, were given to you. This is not conspiracy, it is human nature. Your mind is not a sealed chamber, it is an open system, exchanging with the environment every moment of your life. Influence is the air you breathe. Aldous Huxley once remarked that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. But perhaps the deeper truth is that liberty is never total. You are always standing in a web of unseen threads, culture, biology, history, relationships, all tugging at you in ways you cannot fully disentangle. The question is not, can I escape all manipulation, but how can I live knowing I never will? The mirror paradox. Here lies the paradox. To become entirely free of influence is to cease being human. The same openness that makes you vulnerable to manipulation also makes you capable of love, learning, art, empathy. If you could erase every external touch upon your mind, you would also erase the very connections that make life rich. In cutting away the roots of manipulation, you would sever the roots of meaning itself. Carl Jung hinted at this when he wrote that freedom of will is the ability to do gladly that which we must. True sovereignty does not come from isolating yourself from all influence. It comes from choosing which influences you allow to shape you and how consciously you engage with them. From prisoner to navigator, here is the shift. You are no longer a prisoner trying to escape a cell. You are a navigator steering through an ocean of currents. Currents you cannot eliminate, but can learn to read. You do not need to cut every thread of influence. You need to know which threads you are willing to hold and which to drop. You decide whose voices you invite into your mind. You become the curator of your own mental landscape. Nietzsche's concept of amor fati, the love of one's fate, takes on new meaning here. You do not fight the existence of the currents. You learn to ride them without losing yourself. Owning the story. The final, most powerful realization is this: manipulation is inevitable, but ownership is optional. You may never be able to control every seed planted in your mind, but you can decide which ones you water. You can decide how the story of your life is told, and who gets to hold the pen. This is the ultimate rebellion, to take the raw material the world has given you, some of it pure, some of it poisoned, and use it to craft something that is unmistakably yours. Jean-Paul Sartre was right. You are condemned to be free. Even in the face of infinite influence, you must choose. Even refusing to choose is a choice, and that choice shapes you. The danger of purity. There is a trap here, one final snare for the seeker of freedom, the obsession with pure thought, untouched by external shaping. This pursuit will lead you into isolation, paranoia, and endless self-doubt. No thought is pure, no self is untouched. The attempt to be unmarked by the world is just another illusion, a manipulation of your own making. Instead, maturity comes from accepting your hybridity, that you are a tapestry woven from 1,000 threads, some chosen, some inherited, some imposed. Your power lies not in purging them all, but in rearranging them until the pattern is one you recognize as your own. The dance with influence. When you understand that manipulation is a constant, you stop being naive, but you also stop being afraid. You learn to watch for the familiar hooks, the appeal to fear, the seduction of certainty, the lure of belonging. You learn to pause when a message stirs an intense emotional reaction, asking, who benefits from me feeling this way? You treat every influence as a partner in a dance. Some you choose to step with, some you push away, some you allow close only for a moment before releasing. In doing this, you become impossible to truly capture, not because you are untouched, but because you are aware. Reclaiming the word manipulation. We are taught to see manipulation as purely sinister, but the word itself simply means to handle skillfully. In that sense, all teaching, all art, all persuasion is a form of manipulation. The difference lies in intent and transparency. The manipulations that enslave are those that hide themselves, that bypass your consent. The manipulations that enrich are those you see clearly, agree to, and use as tools for your own growth. A mentor can manipulate you toward courage. A friend can manipulate you toward honesty. Even you can manipulate yourself toward strength by designing environments, habits, and mental frames that shape you in ways you consciously desire. The final image. Picture yourself standing at the center of a vast web. Threads extend in every direction, some taut, pulling you with great force, others loose, barely brushing your skin. Some lead to people you trust, some to forces you'll never meet. You will never cut them all. But you can decide which ones you lean into and which you step back from. This is not perfect freedom, but it is true sovereignty. It is not the absence of influence, but the mastery of relationship to influence. The closing truth. You began this journey believing that manipulation was something done to you by others, a theft of your free will. You've seen now that it runs deeper, that it is woven into the very nature of being human. But you have also seen the possibility to live not as a puppet, nor as a hermit sealed off from the world, but as a conscious participant in the great exchange of influence that is life. The manipulator thrives in your blindness. The moment you open your eyes, their power weakens. The moment you choose your influences instead of absorbing them unconsciously, you step into authorship of your own existence. And so the final question is no longer, how do I avoid being manipulated? But who do I choose to be, knowing that I always will be? That question has no final answer. It must be lived moment by moment, choice by choice. And perhaps that is the greatest freedom you will ever have.